Hi, welcome to the Retro Game Club podcast, episode something, season probably 5. I am Rob, and joining me is someone who is a bad influence, Hugh.
Yes, I've been called that many times by coworkers, friends, parents, spouse,
Community leaders, yeah.
leaders, you name it. You name it.
So this is an unnumbered episode where if we don't have time to record, so what's happening in the future that we're living in for you?
I don't know when it's going to be released. I'm going to guess, though, that I will be playing the new Legend of Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if we don't release this for like a year, that's still a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I will be sick that day from work when it comes out. Maybe 2 days.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to take time off work. I mean, the reality is, I'm just prepared for I'm just going to play it in as many doses as I can and probably mute all these Zelda sites I follow on my RSS reader so I don't accidentally read any spoilers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's real easy for me. I've muted all kinds of media in the past to avoid spoilers for something. So,
and then by that time, the Switch will by the time you are listening to this episode, I guess Nintendo will have re-released the CDI Zeldas too. To kind of, ride that Zelda hype.
Yeah. I believe at this point, the company that calls themselves Atari is going to be selling a new variant of the VCS.
Yeah, the VCS 2, which will still be outdated.
Yes.
This is another, we watched a video game TV show episode. And so we have Bad Influence, which is a British show that never made it to the States. When did this show start? 1992 to 1996. So kind of my formidable gaming years. And how would you explain this show?
It struck me as more of an informational show than anything else. I thought this was going to be like a game show. I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's really more of like an informational show where kids are doing most of the presentations.
Yeah, well, the two hosts plus, sometimes kids are in it as well. Who did you say the one host, Violet, looked like?
I had mentioned the band Roxette.
Yeah, and I said Billy Idol.
Yeah, the hairstyle to me in the clothing, everything says Roxette, which was a popular band in a year or two before, and I guess probably was still popular. Well, 92, they were still putting out some hits.
And she's a great host too. She really is.
Yeah, now the weird dungeon guy, maybe not.
Yeah, so let me get to my notes here. Where are we here? Bad Influence. So
do you want to tell people which episode we watched? So
you could go. Yeah, it'll be in a YouTube link in the show notes. And what episode is this? It's
It's the first episode of a season, if I recall correctly. And of course, I just
season 2. Yeah, from 9993.
Yes, 9993, season 2, episode 1.
Yeah, and the male host, I don't know his name, and I'm not making fun of him, but he is kind of a low-rent Shady Roth.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, his outfit I described as being a JCPenney catalog.
Totally, yeah. So he's the resident ginger, then you have Violet, and then you have the guy you just mentioned who, what is he? He's the cheats expert, but he looks like the inspiration for the book/movie Trainspotting and a modern day meth head.
He does, yeah. I mean, he's kind of in his basement, randomly hitting buttons on controllers till he finds a cheat code.
And then putting stuff on his head so you could read the cheat code.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy was a little scary, and I'm a full-grown adult.
Yes.
But this is a show that, I know we just made fun of it a little bit, but this is a show that packs a lot of information into a very short amount of time.
It seems less of a commercial than all the other shows that we have kind of reviewed, right?
Yeah.
It's more of like a real, like if you're reading a magazine kind of thing.
It is, yeah. Like the first product they talk about is the Amstrad Pen Pal. which I didn't know. It wasn't released in America, of course. It's a PDA, like a early competitor to the Apple Newton. And it didn't work. Did you notice that?
And they called it out too.
Yeah.
They both did.
That's how you know this was not sponsored. Because, sorry, if you type Amstrad Pen Pal into a search engine, you get some sketchy site for pen pals. In the UK, it's like you're gonna write to some random dude.
Yeah.
Named Amstrad.
Well, and at the end of this segment, Violet pulls out a what's it called? An Apple Newton, and it works fine. It works perfectly fine.
It works fine. The Amstrad device, it was really the handwriting recognition that it did not do very well.
And it was very topical. It talked about how it learned your writing and stuff like that, where, how far we've come in about 30 years,
Yeah. Yeah, because it's basically you have to train it to recognize your handwriting, which was different than what Palm did. Palm was like, you have to learn to write like we recognize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Like your A's were triangles and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I still sometimes, because I had one of those for so long, I still occasionally write letters in that weird way. They then spend a bunch of time reviewing the Jurassic Park games, which are all, kind of same name, different game examples.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All very different. I mean, the Game Boy and Super Nintendo versions are close. They're similar, but the Genesis version is completely different. PC, they're all just different games.
Yeah, and this was the SNES one.
Yeah.
And they're British, so they do say SNES, not SNES, and I think it was kind of a slip of the tongue or a misunderstanding, but I think it was the only false statement they really made in this episode, which was they said this game had surround sound on the SNES.
Is that a mistake?
Well, the SNES only had stereo out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I don't know what surround sound is.
It'd be at least 4 speakers, right?
Okay. How do you spell surround? I know you put it in the notes.
2 R's.
SNES Dolby, it has Dolby surround. How does it work? Ironically, it's a thread on Sega16.com. That attempts it's fake surround using stereo speakers.
Wow.
It's Dolby yeah, so it has 4 channels of sound, but it's coming out through stereos. It's going through 2 speakers.
Interesting. I just learned something. Wow. So I wonder if that's kind of like Q sound. That's really strange. Well, Violet was right and I was wrong.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that they talked about a product. So they have the U.S. reporter. They sent one of these kids out to the United States, to California, to report on, looks like, new products in America. And he mentions something called the Action Game Master.
Mm-hmm.
It was a handheld console of some sort that could allegedly play Super Nintendo, Nintendo, and Sega Genesis games via adapters. So it's like, like the analog.
It looked exactly like a modern day Alibaba device.
Yeah. So it was featured in the 1994 Consumer Electronics Show.
Mm-hmm.
And never, ever was released.
And he called it vaporware, and which, vaporware, I guess, was always a problem. But then he started listing other vaporware, like, what was the one from Sega that he brought up? Oh, man. It wasn't the 3D glasses, but it was some kind of headset, I think.
Oh, well, we did get 3D glasses. Well, I guess on the Master System got 3D glasses.
But
I don't know if you the week that we're recording this, the Nicole.express blog did a technical write-up on how the Sega Master System 3D glasses work.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool.
Yeah. It actually doesn't seem like it would be that hard to program a 3D glasses game now that I look at it.
This kid who did this American segment was actually a really good. I want to call him a correspondent. Like I hope he has a career in this stuff, because he did a really good job reporting on video game type stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean that kind of did amaze me. Most of the kids in the show, as opposed to the next one we're going to talk about in a future episode, um, not as good of presenters in the other show.
Yeah, I did want to say I did have notes that, the kids in this show are the opposite of the kids that my kids watch on YouTube.
Yes.
The modern kid would, if this show is done now and kids do it, they'd be all hyped up and, smash that like button and blah, 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 blah. Instead, they just mumble and are so critical, especially the girls don't like anything. Everything was boring. They're so critical. Especially the one, I mean, she did not like any of the games.
Yeah.
But that one segment we're talking about, he does talk about, of the VR TV thing that the Oculus has, where you could watch like Netflix and it's like you're sitting in a cinema, but in VR for some reason. And but it's a little bit different, where I think it's kind of like AR. I think that with the weird Google Glass could do that, where it's like a floating TV in space, kind of.
Yeah.
If you're wearing those glasses, so he did have those, and he thought they were kind of cool. But of course, it had a TV antenna.
TV antenna, yeah. So with the idea you could walk around watching TV, I just noted that if you wore that in any major city in the U.S., you'd be robbed in under 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, it kind of looked like a bomb when he was carrying it too. Like if you walked into a Subway or something like that, you would be tackled for one reason or another. Good or bad.
Yeah. And those things can't pick up anything today now, so I guess they're useless.
Yeah, it's just like the Turbo Graphics, the Turbo Express adapter and all that.
Yeah, I think you can listen to like some pirate radio stations on it. That's about it.
What about this CD-ROM segment? What did you think of that?
I liked it. I thought they did I just put a quick note that I thought they did a really good explanation of how the technology worked for the amount of time they're given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It looked like they actually had, they described it as, this new CD-ROMs have, as much data as 800 floppies, and they had 800 floppies there. Like they actually, some poor stagehand had to go find 800 floppies that looked the same.
Yeah. That would be difficult to do nowadays. I'd have to go to the recycling dump and hope someone dropped off 800 floppies.
Yeah. What else did they talk about in the CD segment, though? There were a few games they called out. I didn't write any of them down, though.
Yeah, that's the problem. I watched this and I only wrote down a couple notes.
What else? We both called out Soccer Kid.
Yeah, because it's the UK, so of course it's a soccer game they're going to review. That makes sense.
It was the most liked game, I think, in this episode by the kids.
Yeah, I don't really remember it having much impact in the US, but again, here, if you made a game called like Football Kid starring Deion Sanders or something, that probably would have done at least all right.
Yeah, so this was a side-scrolling platformer where you're kicking a soccer ball, but you could also use it. It was really creative. You could use it to like bounce on to get higher and a few other things. And it looks like it had pretty modern controls. One of the girls complained about the controls, but it looks like I think you were the first person that said this to me. Amiga games look great until they start moving. This one looked good. This one looked good. It really did.
It did, yeah. And I think this got this is me my bad show prep, but I thought for sure this had a Genesis port too.
If so, it's got to be a Game Club game soon.
Soccer Kit 1993 video game. I might be thinking of something different, but this got a lot of ports.
Ooh, GBA, PlayStation.
Ironically, not Genesis. Did get Super Nintendo. Maybe that's the version I'm thinking of. Jaguar. I don't remember that. Game Boy Advance, PlayStation.
We've got to play this.
Yeah, I'd give this a try. Why not?
What else about this show that you wanted to call out?
They talk about the Super Scope, and it just sort of reminds you how weak the Super Scope library is, because they're talking about, like, finally, it's a new game for the Super Scope, and it's like, was it Yoshi's Safari, something like that?
Yeah, it was.
And I'm like, oh, that's right. They really didn't do a lot with that. You know, they released this thing. It has a pack-in game. I mean, I assume it works with like Terminator and Terminator. But I don't think it had a huge library, did it?
No, not at all. No.
Yeah, I own one of these. I've literally never hooked it up.
It's one I think I've held one twice in my life. It's just every once in a while I'll see them at a retro store and just be like, even I don't need that.
Yeah, this is like, so it's got, I can name all the games in under a minute here. Battle Clash, Bazooka Blitzkrieg, The Hunt for Red October, but not required. Lamborghini American Challenge, again, optional. Lemmings 2, also optional. Metal Combat Falcon's Revenge, Operation Thunderbolt, Revolution X, this must be Japanese, Sugoroku Gingasenki, which is also optional. The bundled game T2, Tin Star X Zone, and Yoshi's Safari.
Yeah, I mean, Yoshi's Safari's got to be the best one of those, right?
Yeah, I'm probably going to go T2, the arcade game.
See, I haven't seen that on SNES.
It's not bad. It's a pretty decent port.
It's probably better than the 1-up T2 arcade game because even two small adults are too big to stand that close to each other.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hook up two Super Scopes at the same time. I wonder. But anyways, you can stand far apart and play it.
Yeah. And then Violet kind of had the last word in the show, which I thought was great, is they had a Mortal Kombat segment because it had just been released. Mm-hmm. And they talked about it for the SNES. She said, really the most annoying thing about this game is not that it doesn't have blood and that you need a combo for it, but that it makes a bunch of people that don't know about video games say critical things about video games that are completely incorrect. I thought that was great. And they left it at that. They didn't really get into it. They just kind of left it at, you all, if you're watching this show, you probably know what's going on. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's a great point. Now, they didn't have, I don't think UK had the same kind of like weird, congressional, because they don't have they have an equivalent of a Congress, let's say. But they didn't have all the weird hearings like we had in the US with people, Joe Lieberman and those types getting all worked up about video games.
Yeah, they just probably had parents and stuff see it on the news and say, this is going to ruin our kids, when it was probably the parents that are ruining the kids. Have any closing thoughts about this one? Would you watch any other episodes?
I might, yeah, because this is actually, like I said, it's actually informative. Like, they get their facts right, as far as I can tell. You can win a free CDI from watching it. Did you catch that at the end?
No, I don't think I heard that part.
The very last segment was about the CDI and like the kids watching basically a cutscene on loop while holding the CDI controller. And and you could win the CDI.
That would be pretty cool. I mean, people could rip on the CDI all they want. It wasn't a great gaming system, but to own one would be cool.
Yeah, I own one. It's actually not as cool as you think.
And back then, I mean.
Yes.
Still, probably not as cool as you think.
Yeah, it's just taking up space right now.
But, I definitely would say this is probably one of the... I would say this is the best show out of the ones we've watched so far, just because it felt like reading like an EGM or something like that, It
did. It's definitely... I mean, Starcade is always kind of give me my sentimental favorite. This is the best like quality show, like best production, actual real information.
It doesn't feel like a half-hour commercial.
Yeah, it obviously can't be, because I mean they full on bashed some. They showed one product just not even working.
Yeah, and then the game reviews are just the kids saying like, "I'm bored." 3 stars.
Yeah, whereas today, like if you send a YouTuber that Amstrad, Pen Pal, they would just and said, hey, by the way, here's $1,000 to review our pen pal, right? Yeah, believe me, it's going to get a good review.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, it's like the Amico reviews from last year.
Right. They saw a demo of it that may or may not have been hooked up to an Amico. Was probably hooked up to an Android box, under the table. And yeah, they all come out, oh, Amico, greatest thing ever, because Tommy Tallarico said something nice about you, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if they got cash for it. They got a 10% stake in the company that's worth nothing, perhaps.
Yeah, in fact, you owe money at that point. You're part of it. You're part of his lawsuits. Well, all right. I guess for some reason we were busy, so we didn't record an episode. So we had this one ready to go.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else to say about Bad Influence.
I don't either. I think you really should watch this. This is a pretty good show.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be in the show notes. Let us know what you think, and especially if we have any listeners in the UK, or I don't know if this was broadcast to the rest of Europe, but let us know if you watched this growing up and what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
And thanks for listening.